In the far reaches of the galaxy, where stars burned quietly and silence ruled, the Avarian people waited for help that never came. Their moon, once a thriving colony known as Tyrak Vel, now lay broken beneath dust and ash. Massive white spires that once touched the sky stood shattered. The war had taken everything: their food, their power, their skies, and still, the galaxy moved on without them. The Avarians were a proud, avian-like species, feathers dulled by ash, wings useless beneath the low gravity and cold air. They had once been allies in the Grand Accord, the great coalition of powerful worlds that united against a rising threat. But when the tides of war turned, and it became clear that Tyrak Vel could not be defended without cost, their allies made the simplest choice: they left. Supply routes vanished. Communications were cut. And soon, the Avarians found themselves no longer part of the war or the peace. They were forgotten by politics, left out of agreements, and erased from maps. Months passed. Their distress beacons continued to send silent screams into the dark, repeating the same hopeful signal that no one answered. Food supplies ran low. Entire chambers of their once great libraries were sealed to conserve heat. The Avarian young were born into silence, never knowing the sound of music or the feel of wind on their wings. Elder Kirek, the leader of what was left, watched his people grow smaller, colder, more tired each day. He no longer spoke of rescue, because hope was a kind of lie that aged the soul. Still, the beacon blinked. Many light years away, on the very edge of human-charted space, a different kind of silence hummed within a Terran mining outpost, orbiting a red dwarf star. The station, named Thule Base, was quiet and isolated, staffed by a skeleton crew more familiar with R scanners than diplomacy. Commander Elara Vaughn, a former Navy officer turned civilian systems overseer, was completing her shift when a technician approached her with a confused look and a handheld receiver. The signal was weak, barely above background noise, but unmistakable, a distress call in a language most humans hadn't heard in generations. Avarian code, the technician said, eyebrows raised. They were supposed to be gone. Elara didn't respond immediately. Her mind turned sharply toward memories from the academy lessons about abandoned species, silent battles, and how politics had slowly hollowed out the once noble mission of the Galactic Accord. But humans, she reminded herself, had never been part of that elite circle. Earth had been too primitive during the Great Alliances. By the time humanity had reached the stars, the universe had already sorted itself and humans were outsiders peering through the cracks. That had changed slowly over the last century. Now, small Terran systems had their own fleets, their own outposts, and their own sense of morality. And for Elara Vaughn, there were some signals you just didn't ignore. The council aboard Thule Base disagreed. "It's outside our jurisdiction," one officer muttered. "Could be a trap," another suggested. But Elara stood in front of them, her jaw tight, her voice calm. "If it were us, if Earth was broken and forgotten, wouldn't we want someone to care?" There was a pause, then silence. And finally, a reluctant nod. Within 24 hours, her ship, the Mercy's Arrow, an older but reliable exploration vessel, was prepped for launch. She took with her a crew of engineers, medics, and translators, along with basic aid supplies. The journey took 4 days through back routes of hyperspace. During that time, the crew shared rumors about what they might find. "If they're still alive, they won't trust us," someone whispered. Another added, "They were proud once. Now they'll see us as scavengers." Elara said little. She studied old Avarian maps and stared at images of their cities before the war, elegant structures made of crystal alloys, gardens that shimmered like living art. A once great people, now reduced to myth. When the Mercy's Arrow finally arrived in orbit over Tyrak Vel, they found a moon blanketed in shadow. The once reflective surface was scarred with deep burns and frozen ridges. Automated defense systems long dead. No satellites. No orbiting ships. Only the faint beacon pulsing from the heart of a broken city. They descended carefully. The landing zone was uneven, cracked by time and tremors. Dust clouds curled around the ship's legs as it touched down. The air outside was cold but breathable. Alara led the first scouting team herself, armored in light suits and carrying translators, medkits, and warming devices. The city was a graveyard of beauty. Broken towers leaned like tired elders, and shattered stained glass lay like frozen water on the streets. The Avarians emerged slowly from the shadows, thin and cautious, their eyes sharp with hunger and doubt. Some carried makeshift weapons tools, sharpened rods, old blasters with dying charges. Alara raised her hands slowly, carefully. "We heard your call," she said through the translator. "We came to help." The leader stepped forward. Tall, feathered, eyes like burnished silver. Elder Kirek. He studied her for a long time before answering. "You are not the first to say that," he said quietly, "but you may be the last." There was no welcome, only permission to stay. Over the next few hours, the human crew set up thermal shelters and distributed food packs. Avarian children peeked out from corners, eyes wide as they watched humans unpack water purifiers and light towers. Medics began examining injuries that had gone untreated for years, wings shattered in debris, bones healed wrong, malnutrition beyond any standard. There were no smiles, only silence, broken by soft thanks and guarded stares. Alara sat with Kirek later that night. "Why didn't anyone else come?" she asked. Kirek didn't look at her. He simply replied, "Because we became inconvenient." She didn't argue. She didn't apologize for the rest of the universe. She only said, "We're not leaving." Somewhere in the dark sky above, drones belonging to the core worlds watched through cloaked sensors. They noted the human landing. They calculated responses. And they waited, uncertain whether these humans were fools or a threat to the silence the universe had so carefully maintained. The first night on Tyrak Vel was colder than the crew expected, not just because of the frozen air, but because of the silence that pressed in from all sides. The Avarians had allowed the humans to stay, but there was no real trust, only quiet observation from dark corners, as if every Terran movement might prove a hidden agenda. The moon itself felt hollow in more ways than one, its crust thinned from past mining, its cities emptied of sound, its people emptied of warmth. The human team worked through the long lunar night, setting up portable heaters, light towers, and makeshift kitchens in the open courtyard of the ruined city center. Most of the Avarians stayed back, watching from broken windows and the shadows of crumbled archways. Commander Elara Vaughn refused to let the coldness affect her mission. She gave orders calmly, encouraged the crew to speak softly, and made sure that every act of aid, whether it was handing out blankets or repairing broken solar panels, was offered without pride or condition. In the morning, a group of Avarian children cautiously approached the light towers, drawn by the warmth and the scent of warm broth. It was the first small crack in the invisible wall between the two species. Elder Kirek, silent as ever, watched this from a distance, his expression unreadable. He had seen too many promises before, too many ships that came and went, offering hope with one hand and disappointment with the other. As the days passed, the tension slowly began to change shape. Some Avarians stepped forward to accept food and medical help. Human doctors treated frostbite, infections, and broken wings that had healed improperly due to a lack of care. The language barrier was difficult, but not impossible. Translator drones helped, and some of the younger Avarians began repeating human words with curiosity. Still, there were misunderstandings. An engineer accidentally entered a sacred chamber, sparking angry cries from the Avarians and a tense standoff. Alara personally apologized, bowing in the traditional Avarian way, which she had studied from old records. The gesture calmed the situation, but the reminder was clear: this alliance was fragile. Chief Medic Jonah, a calm and kind man with years of field experience, made special effort to understand their physiology and culture. He treated their wounds with care, never rushing, always explaining each step. Soon, word spread among the Avarians that the humans were different from those who had left them behind. Some even began to speak to the crew without hesitation. One of the youngest survivors, a bright-eyed Avarian named Sarah, followed Jonah around as an unofficial assistant, mimicking his movements and asking endless questions through the translator. It was a small, unexpected sign of connection, a sign that hope was not yet lost. But not all signs were good. In orbit, cloaked probes, stealth drones sent by the core worlds continued watching. Their AI systems recorded everything: troop movement, resource transfers, data exchanges. From a distant command center on a massive core world space station, officials monitored the human aid mission with suspicion. These humans, once unimportant and uninvited to galactic politics, were now disrupting a carefully buried failure. HFY Vel was supposed to be a forgotten place, a quiet shame erased by time. The Avarians were considered a closed chapter in the Great War, left to their fate with full awareness by the galactic elite. But now, if they survived and their story was told, if evidence of betrayal leaked, it would mean scandal, chaos, and a loss of trust in the very systems the core worlds had spent centuries building. Back on the moon, Allura had no idea she was being watched. Her focus remained on the people in front of her. She walked the ruined streets daily, learning the layout of the city and identifying what systems might be repaired. She was determined not just to save the Avarians, but to help them reclaim their lives. It wasn't about making Earth look good or gaining political ground. It was about doing the right thing, no matter how forgotten the place or how small the people. Yet something about the silence above kept her uneasy. The Mercy's arrow had detected faint distortions in orbit, ripples too precise to be natural. She quietly ordered sensor sweeps every few hours, just in case. One evening, Elder Kirek invited Allura to a hidden chamber deep beneath the city ruins. It was cold, dark, and sealed behind ancient reinforced doors. The path was narrow and covered in dust, untouched for years. Inside was a vaulted hall with glowing crystal walls that flickered softly with stored data. This was the Heart Archive, he explained, a place of memory and history. He showed her a central data vault that contained records of the war communications between core world officials and Avarian generals, documents that revealed how the decision to abandon HFY Vel had been made, not in panic, but in calculation. They knew we would die, Kirek said quietly. They chose it. Wrote it into their logistics plans. One less mouth, one less cost. Allura felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The archive was more than history, it was proof. Evidence that could bring powerful systems crashing down. Kirek asked no promises, only said, "You should know what you protect." Allura gave no answer that night. She left the chamber with the data stored in a secure capsule, uncertain of what she would do with it. As she stepped back into the moonlight, she saw children playing near the light towers. Sarah trying to fly short distances with her healing wings. A group of human engineers were showing young Avarians how to fix a water pump, laughing as one of them accidentally splashed a crew member. For a moment, it felt like a new world might be possible. But in the sky above, invisible and watching, the core worlds were preparing a different plan. The next morning brought a strange sound. Not machines, not footsteps, but a warning tone from the Mercy's arrow. A breach in the outer perimeter. Allura rushed to the command module and checked the live feed. A ship had entered the system. No signal, no ID broadcast. Stealth class. It didn't attack, but it circled the moon like a predator studying its prey. A soft voice from the comms technician broke the silence. "Commander, they know we're here." Allura's jaw tightened. She knew this mission had just changed. They weren't just rescuers anymore. They were protectors of a truth that someone wanted buried. She looked out at the city, at the recovering people, the curious children, the makeshift homes beginning to glow with light. The universe had left these people to die. Now, someone wanted to silence them again. But this time, humanity had arrived, and not all stories end the same way twice. The strange ship in orbit never made direct contact, but its presence was like a shadow stretching over the moon, reminding everyone that their time might be running out. Commander Allura Vaughn didn't panic, at least not outwardly. She increased patrols around the human camp, strengthened signal encryptions, and ordered the Mercy's arrow to scan every 10 minutes for unusual movement or communication bursts. She also made a quiet decision no one would be told about the core world's interest in the Avarian data vault, not until she could fully understand what danger it brought. But tension began to ripple through both crews. The humans grew restless, some whispering about how this mission had gone too far beyond its purpose. They had signed up to help people, not get involved in galactic politics. Meanwhile, the Avarians noticed the change in energy, sensing fear even when it was unspoken. Elder Kirek remained calm, but others, including younger warriors like Rallick, began to question if the humans had hidden motives like all the others before them. Alara knew she was standing on a delicate thread. One wrong move, one misunderstanding, and everything they'd built could collapse. That's when she decided it was time for something different. Instead of holding formal meetings or strict command schedules, she encouraged her crew to eat in the open spaces, to sit near the Avarian shelters, to invite them into daily routines. Some resisted at first, unsure of how to communicate or behave. But slowly, and to Alara's quiet relief, something unexpected began to grow: shared stories, laughter, even music. One afternoon, Chief Medic Jonah found Sarah, the young Avarian girl who had followed him around like a shadow, watching him work with tools she could barely name. He offered her an old human datapad, loaded with interactive lessons and simple games. At first, she didn't know how to touch the screen, tapping gently like it might break. But as she learned, others gathered, and soon Jonah was hosting what the crew jokingly called Feathered School. On the other side of the camp, a group of engineers worked with older Avarians to repair the water recycling unit beneath the central tower. The Avarians showed them an old method of channeling thermal energy through crystal conduits, something lost in human engineering practices. In return, humans taught them to splice emergency wiring and patch worn circuits using salvage parts. Alara watched all of it from a distance and realized something rare was happening. Two species were building trust, not through promises or speeches, but through actions repeated quietly each day. No official treaties, no signatures, just one hand reaching out and the other slowly choosing to take it. Even Kirek began to soften. He invited Alara to sit with the elders one evening during the Avarian silent song, a ritual where they hummed low, harmonic tones meant to remember the dead without speaking their names. Alara didn't understand the meaning fully, but she respected the space, and when it ended, Kirek looked at her, not with suspicion, but with a kind of tired gratitude that said, "You stayed, even when it was easier to leave." But as the bond between humans and Avarians grew stronger, so did the danger overhead. The stealth ship remained silent, but one night, Mercy's arrow detected a brief transmission spike, a tight beam message aimed deep into core world territory. Alara knew what that meant. Someone had seen the alliance forming and had decided it was time to intervene. She gathered her senior staff and told them everything: the data vault, the core world betrayal, the possible political fallout. Reactions were mixed. Jonah stood by her immediately, his hands clenched and voice firm. "We didn't come to play politics. We came to help people. That doesn't change." But others were shaken. One technician asked, "What if we're ordered to leave? What if Earth doesn't back us up?" Alara didn't have an answer. She only said, "If they abandon us too, we'll still stay." It wasn't the answer of a soldier or a politician, it was the answer of someone who had seen too much suffering to walk away. That same night, she asked Kirek if he would allow a small group of human officers to train with the Avarian scouts. At first, he hesitated, but eventually, he agreed. "Not to fight," he said, "but to understand how we survive." The next morning, the two groups ran drills together, moving through broken tunnels and wide ruins, learning hand signals and silent motion. Avarian wings weren't strong enough to fly anymore, but their bodies were light and quick. Humans brought heavier tech scanners, portable shields, makeshift camouflage. Together, they began to form something new, not just an alliance, but a unit that trusted each other with their backs turned and their lives at stake. The core worlds, however, were not interested in friendships. On the fifth day, two drones entered Tirek Vale's orbit. This time, they were not hidden. They broadcasted a message on open frequencies, calm and polite. "Attention, unauthorized vessel. This is a protected region of historical interest. Your presence is in violation of Core Directive 47B. You are ordered to depart immediately." Alara responded with equal calm. This territory was declared abandoned by the Accord. "We are engaged in humanitarian relief. We have found living citizens. You have no jurisdiction here. The drones went silent. Then one of them released a small probe that began mapping the moon's surface. It hovered dangerously close to the refugee shelters. Avarian scouts prepared to destroy it, but Allura held them back. They want us to act first, she said. They're baiting us into conflict. Instead, she ordered Jonah to begin transferring the data vault's contents into a secure transmitter aboard the Mercy's Arrow. If they move against us, she said, the truth gets out. Every detail. Every betrayal. Let's see if the universe still has a conscience. That night, Avarians and humans gathered around a shared heat core built from salvaged tech. There was no music, no official celebration, just quiet conversation and eyes that looked a little less guarded. Jonah sat beside Syrah, showing her star maps and letting her point to worlds she'd never seen. Allura stood near Carrick, both leaders silent for a long while. Finally, he said, I never thought your kind would care. Allura looked up at the stars, knowing that above them, eyes were watching, and somewhere beyond those stars, decisions were being made. We weren't supposed to be part of the universe either, she replied. But maybe that's why we understand you. And in that moment, on a broken moon far from any important place, two species stood quietly together bracing for whatever would come next, knowing that the bridge they had built was not made of metal or treaties, but of trust born from kindness, risk, and the simple choice to stay. The next sunrise brought more than just light. It brought tension that pressed heavy on every corner of Tyrock Vale. The core world drones had disappeared from sight during the night, but everyone knew they hadn't left. Their silence was too perfect, too calm, like predators circling before the strike. Allura Vaughn stood on the roof of the Mercy's Arrows operations module, scanning the gray horizon as her breath turned to mist in the cold. Around her, the human crew moved quickly, securing communication lines and reinforcing energy shields. Below, the Avarians worked beside them without needing to be asked, digging trenches, preparing shelters, and strengthening the crystal conduits beneath the surface. There was no panic, only a quiet, growing focus. It wasn't just a fear of an attack, it was the knowledge that something larger was in motion, something they could not fully see. Allura had received no response from Earth Command, even though she had sent multiple encrypted updates. Either the messages hadn't reached them, or someone didn't want to reply. The thought burned in her chest, but she pushed it down. She didn't have time to feel betrayed. She had people to protect. But it was clear now that what was happening on this moon mattered far beyond Tyrock Vale, and if help came, it would not be soon. Later that day, while inspecting a newly repaired energy conduit with Kirek and Jonah, an alarm went off across the camp. The motion sensors on the northern ridge had detected movement something large and fast, approaching from low orbit. Allura raced to the command terminal and watched as a new vessel dropped into the thin atmosphere. Unlike the previous drones, this was not automated. It was a manned diplomatic ship bearing the silver-blue emblem of the core worlds. Everyone froze. No weapons had been drawn, but the intent was clear: they were here to talk, not to fight. At least, not yet. Allura ordered everyone to stand down but remain alert. The ship landed in the old marketplace, its landing struts hissing against cracked stone. A small group of uniformed officials stepped out, their faces calm and polished, as if they walked into a meeting room, not a war-torn refugee camp. The one in front introduced herself as Envoy Hallrix, an elegant woman with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach her face. She requested a private meeting with Allura and Elder Kirek, saying they only wanted to resolve the misunderstanding and return things to order. Allura agreed but insisted Jonah and two Avarian guards attend as well. The meeting took place in a makeshift tent near the central power node. Inside, Hallrix wasted no time. She offered assistance supplies, relocation, even medical aid if the humans would simply hand over the Avarian records and withdraw from Tyrock Vale. There is no need for this moon to become a symbol of conflict, she said smoothly. Let the past stay buried. We can offer a better future elsewhere. Allura stared at her for a long time before replying. She thought of the data vault buried beneath the ruins, the recordings of betrayal, the cold calculations that had left a species to die. Then she looked at Kirek, who said nothing but whose silence spoke of decades of waiting to be heard. Alara leaned forward and said, "The past is not buried. It's alive. And the only reason there's still a future here is because people stayed when they didn't have to." Halrix's smile tightened. She warned them, carefully and calmly, that if they refused, the core worlds could declare the moon a restricted zone and enforce removal. "You are alone out here," she said. "No one will come to help." But before Alara could respond, something happened that no one expected. Sura, the young Avarian girl, pushed into the tent, holding a broken comms tablet in her hands. She had been trying to repair it to send a message of her own to the humans' families, to anyone who would listen. Her message hadn't gone far, but it had reached someone, an independent civilian ship passing through the region. And that ship had forwarded it across a dozen networks. The story of the abandoned Avarians and the humans who stayed had begun to spread. Not through governments, but through people, miners, traders, small outposts, rogue stations. Within hours, the Mercy's Arrow received a wave of messages, some offering words of support, others offering supplies or medical gear. One message simply said, "Tell them we see you. Don't stop." Halrix's face changed when she heard the transmission logs. It wasn't fear, it was irritation. The core worlds thrived on silence and forgotten places. They didn't want a story. But now, a story had begun, and it was not theirs to control. Alara turned to Kirik and said, "You don't need to hide anymore." And then, for the first time in years, Kirik stepped forward and spoke not with quiet resignation, but with strength. He told Halrix they would not leave, that Tirak Vale was their home, and they would rebuild it with those who chose to stand beside them. Halrix made no threats. She simply stood, thanked them for their time, and returned to her ship. But everyone knew she would not give up so easily. The next few days were filled with work and tension. Avarian and human teams reinforced the city's shielding systems and began building long-range signal towers to keep the story alive. Sarah became a voice that others listened to, her message replayed on independent networks. Jonah joked that she was accidentally becoming a diplomat, but her eyes had changed older, wiser. And then something beautiful happened. A cargo freighter arrived unauthorized, dusty, and worn, but filled with food, clothing, and medical gear donated by civilians from systems that had no flags but remembered what it meant to help. Aboard it were volunteers, humans, a few other species, even a couple of exiled core world citizens who said they couldn't stay silent anymore. One of them, an old engineer named Mara, helped repair the primary reactor that had been failing for weeks. She looked around and said, "This place isn't a ruin. It's a seed." The Avarians, once quiet and wary, began to sing again, not the morning songs of silence, but the old songs of flight and homecoming. Their voices echoed through the ruins, blending with the hum of machines and the laughter of children who had started to build kites from scraps, pretending to fly once more. Alara stood on the edge of the courtyard that evening, watching the lights return to windows that had been dark for years. Trust, she realized, hadn't come from promises or bargains. It had come from staying when it was hard, from fixing what was broken, from seeing someone's pain and choosing not to walk away. And the kindness they had offered, quiet, uncelebrated, had returned to them in ways no one had expected. But Alara also knew this was not the end. Halrix would return. The core worlds would not forget. But for the first time, they were not alone, and that changed everything. The wind that swept across the ruins of Tirak Vale on that cold morning didn't carry the sharp sting of hopelessness anymore. It carried the dust of a city slowly waking up. A place once buried in silence and broken memories now buzzed with the quiet energy of people trying to live again. Alara Vaughn stood on the observation deck of the Mercy's Arrow, staring out at the horizon where new shelters rose beside ancient stone. What had once been makeshift camps were becoming neighborhoods, and what had once been a rescue mission had grown into something far more powerful. Every corner of the moon told a story: an engineer teaching children how to use solar tools, an Avarian mother holding her baby close as she planted seeds in soil, thought dead, an old mechanic fixing a water pipe with help from a winged elder. They had no flag to raise, no anthem to sing, but there was pride in the way they moved, in how they refused to give up. The galaxy had stolen everything from the Avarians: their place in the stars, their trust, their dignity, but the humans had brought back something even stronger, the idea that kindness, when shared and protected, could be louder than power. It hadn't come in a single heroic act, but in hundreds of small ones, patching a wall, holding a hand. And that kindness had now taken root in places even the core worlds could not reach. But peace, Alara knew, was not permanent. On the outer edges of the system, long-range scans showed movement again, core world ships, not just scouts this time, but cruisers. Haurix's warning had not been idle. She had returned to her people with the truth, and now the response was forming, a diplomatic blockade, a threat wrapped in law and silence. There would be no immediate attack, but the message was clear: if they refused to abandon the moon, they would be cut off, declared outlaws. Supplies would be restricted. Funding would be denied. And Earth Command, still silent despite weeks of messages, would likely follow suit. Alara gathered her team and explained everything. No sugarcoating. No false hope. Just the truth. We may be on our own soon, she said, and things may get harder. But I need to know who's staying. No one left the room. Not Jonah, not the engineers, not even the young techs who had never meant to stay this long. One spoke quietly, a voice full of steel. We didn't come this far to leave when it matters most. The next day, Kirik called a gathering of both species beneath the broken spire that once marked the heart of Avarian culture. With Alora beside him, he spoke not with fire or blame, but with something deeper: hope. He talked about the past not as a wound, but as a lesson. We are not the first to be forgotten, he said, but we may be the first to be remembered again because someone cared. That night, another ship arrived, not military, not official, just a small freighter painted with bright, mismatched colors. It carried supplies donated from dozens of independent colonies and remote stations. The crew was a mix of ex-soldiers, farmers, artists, and even a few alien merchants who had heard about Tyrak Vel and wanted to help. One old man, gray and quiet, gave Alora a satchel of seeds. We don't have much, he said, but I thought maybe they could grow here. New roots. She took it with both hands, her voice catching in her throat. And then, unexpectedly, Earth Command finally responded. A short, cold transmission. They acknowledged the situation but refused to take sides. You were sent on a relief mission, the message said. You are advised to disengage from political interference. Return to charted space. It was, in many ways, a final order. But Alara didn't move. Instead, she made her own transmission, public and unfiltered. She didn't speak with anger, but with clarity. She told the story of Tyrak Vel, of the abandoned people, of the kindness that had changed everything. She didn't ask for rescue. She simply said, we are here. We see them. And that is enough. The message spread across the fringe like wildfire. Small ships began arriving quietly, some staying, some dropping supplies and leaving. The core worlds could shut down official channels, but they could not silence every voice. And then came the final test. A core world envoy ship landed again, this time with a group of officers prepared to evacuate the humans by force. No weapons drawn, but full authority to remove them under breach of interstellar protocol. Alara met them at the landing ramp with her crew behind her, and the Avarians standing tall beside them. Haurix was not among them this time, only young officers, unsure and stiff. One stepped forward and read a statement. Alara listened. Then she simply said, no. The officer hesitated. You understand this means exile? I do, she said. Then you will be left here, he replied. With no protections, no support. We have each other, she answered. That's enough. And with no choice left, the officers left. The ship rose into the sky and vanished into the stars. For a moment, silence returned to the moon, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a beginning. The next few weeks passed with tireless work. New shelters became homes. The old vault beneath the ruins was slowly transformed into a school where both human and Avarian children learned together. The spire was rebuilt, not as a monument of the past, but as a symbol of survival. And every person who came brought a piece of something bigger, not just tools or food, but art, music, memories, and stories. A network formed, quiet but steady, of those who believed in something more than power. They called it the Kindred Path, a movement of shared aid, formed not by governments, but by individuals who remembered what it meant to stand for one another. Alara no longer wore her uniform. She walked through the city like any other builder, fixing broken roofs, listening to dreams, planting seeds. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the valley, Sarah sat beside her, holding a datapad covered in drawings of what the city might one day look like: gardens, libraries, towers made from lightstone and metal. "Do you think it will really grow?" she asked. Alara smiled, brushing dust from the girl's feathers. "It already has," she said. And above them, in the sky once filled with threats, the stars looked a little closer, as if even the universe itself had paused to witness the quiet miracle happening on this forgotten moon, a miracle not of war or conquest, but of kindness that refused to die, and of people who had every reason to give up but chose instead to build hope with their hands. They had been left behind by the galaxy, but they had proven that being forgotten did not mean being lost. The universe had taken everything but humanity, without asking for anything in return, had given something far greater. It had given them a future,